Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Keep the Line Moving, the podcast designed to talk about leadership, life, and inspiration. I am your host, Chris Gargano, and today's topic is developing relationships, specifically developing relationships in the workplace to strengthen your culture. And our guest, Len Girimonte, is somebody I have known for more than 30 years. He has spent the majority of his career in leadership development. In fact, he has coached and mentored everyone from interns to executives. Here's the list of his background: program management, leadership, performance and talent management, culture development, acquisitions, customer operations, and portfolio management. He has a very well-rounded background, and he will share some of those key insights that he has gained over his years. Currently, he is in a Fortune 50 company in tech in leadership development. We will talk about ego in leadership, what makes a trusting culture, and difficult conversations. You don't want to miss this. Here's our guest on Keep the Line Moving, my friend, Len Girimonte. All right, Len, it is great to see you. It is rare when I get to visit with a 30-year friend, over 30 years, and also a former St. Mary's Gale. And if I had any more Gale stuff here, it would be embarrassing. Len, how are you?
Good. Go Gales. I love that.
How you doing?
Doing well. Really excited to speak with you today, Chris.
Absolutely. It's wonderful to see you. You work for a huge company. It's a Fortune 50 tech company, but you're not at liberty to say it. We respect that. We just want to dive into who you are as a leadership development guru. Is that fair, Len?
Yes. I've been part of Silicon Valley companies over the last 20, 25 years, ranging from everything from leadership development to overall learning and development.
Len, so you've been in leadership development for 20 years, and you and I have talked about this over the years. In fact, you've been a guest at my NYU leadership class, senior seminar in leadership, and you were a hit, of course. There's people still wanting your autograph, but we'll get to that later. Let's look at this. How valuable is what you do on a daily basis at your company?
Yeah, I think it's incredibly valuable. I think it's not easy to sort of, learn the A to Z's and competencies of a specific role. I think the messy part is the leadership, is creating relationships. It's how you do work versus what you do. That's really, really important. And it's not tangible. It's not something that's easily measured. And so I think sometimes it can be overlooked. But without that foundation of leadership, purpose, and trust, you really can't move forward and really be successful in a role or on a team.
And you have this, and for lack of a better term here, you've battle tested, you've really researched and put in the laboratory all of the concepts of what you just talked about. So in the course of the 20 years in your life being in leadership development, what are some trial and error moments that you've seen helping people? What comes up the most, getting people to have their true leadership abilities shine?
You know what? I think a lot of it really boils down to confidence and really sharing your vulnerabilities. I've noticed that the best leaders sort of share that, and I've noticed more and more it really is that confidence. It's the maybe those insecurities where people may not be as confident, that they're not as willing to sort of share and share knowledge and share failures as well. I think once you get that across and in place, then really you can build from there, no matter what the modality or no matter what theory or there's a million different tools to look at this. At the end of the day, I really think it boils down to that, just feeling confident and really comfortable with yourself.
I'm going to show some personal empathy. And here's what I mean by that, Len. So when I started the company in January of 2023, I had so much, like fire about, I got to fix the world. I got to help leaders. I got to change some high ego leaders or leaders that perform this way, and kind of being a little bit, in my mind, closed-minded. There's my vulnerability, right? I was a little bit like, I got to change. I have learned exactly what you said, that I have a lot more empathy, patience, and compassion for leaders that don't show vulnerability. Although I agree with it, and I'm doing it now, and there's people that do it all the time, and I think it's a strength. I do feel for those that don't understand that and connect those dots, which means if I'm the leader and I'm showing vulnerability, maybe they won't see me as the leader. You know what I'm saying? That's so important to have compassion for and empathy for those folks that were taught differently, came up differently, or have a view of leadership that is just different than that, right, Len?
Chris, empathy is so huge. I'm glad you brought that up. I think one of the key things of great leaders is understanding that communication style of the other person. So, sort of what you said, you know, is that person that you're speaking to someone who is sort of improvisational and can sort of just really wants that light bulb and that short, brief message? Or is that other person, really going to look deeply at information and wants data down to the, in what you may feel is really super granular. But for them, maybe they need all of that information. There's so many different styles, and knowing that and approaching that and sort of figuring out that way that you can create that bond or get that message across is so helpful. Understanding different audiences is critical. How I show up for one person's meeting is going to be very different than another, and I need to know going into that how I'm going to approach that and how best I'm going to get that message across.
That goes back to foundational moments in implementing leadership development at companies, right? So you've been fortunate to be part of existing leadership development programs within organizations. So when you teach this, Len, exactly with what you just said, you cannot have a one size fits all leadership approach. You need to know your people and just how you perfectly stated it, how they respond to information, how they respond to conflict. This is all important in information. And as you said, data. How do you teach that to an emerging leader or somebody who is just not getting it?
Yeah, it's huge. And I've run leadership programs both at the junior level all the way up to pretty advanced senior levels. But at the junior level, it's where you can really sort of get that across early on. And that kind of goes back to the look, I'm junior. Chris, how you said it, even though you weren't junior, it was a new company that you had started, and you went in with sort of these intentions that here's how it's going to work. Here's how I sort of envision it. I think the same thing happens for everyone, not just at the junior level, but I think at the junior level, you can get that across. And what we've tried to sort of impart in the past is, again, be secure, understand that it's okay to say, look, here's where I don't have all the answers, or my way is not always the best way. Uh, and and showing that getting different points of view is really, really great. You may have a good answer. I may have a good answer for or a solution for a problem. I could probably get a better answer if I hear three diverse opinions that aren't necessarily the same as mine. I may disagree or have a different thought, but having those discussions and having that different leadership, having those points of view is so important. And then gaining that data and then making an informed decision, you can go from there. But I do think the first thing that you have to get across is, look, yes, everyone here is smart. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. But understand that, and understand that it's not always your decision or your solution that's the best. And being open to these different points of view are so important. Getting confident, being able to sort of say, "Hey, yeah, I had a good answer, but your answer is better," is really, really a huge thing. Creating that network and being able to sort of take that feedback is huge.
And doesn't that start and end with someone's relationship with their ego? Because it's logical if you were to go and get the 50,000-foot view and look down at a leader not taking in the opinions, suggestions, and expertise of their team, it's logical to say, why wouldn't you do that? You have this person who's an expert here, this person who's an expert here. They're feeding you to be able to make a logical and educated decision. So why would that not make sense in a logical standpoint? Well, the ego is very complicated, extremely complicated. Can you talk about how you have dealt with people that let their ego get in the way to say, I need to make the final call. I'm the smartest person in the room, per se?
we've in some of my past programs, we've had very strong peer feedback sessions where people will actually almost sort of rank each other and how they come across. And for the first time, you've got some of these leaders again with huge ego. Nothing wrong with ego. I think it's important to have it, as long as you recognize your unconscious biases. And so, what we've had people in the past that just rocked it, crushed their work, but were never really sort of measured on how work was done. And so, even though they crushed it and had great results or seemingly great results, it was always on their own. It was like once they received this feedback, it was like, wow, my perception is different than what people's perceptions are of me. And that is where I think you can get to the greater level and move from good to great, is having that awareness. It's not always easy. And look, we always say it's important to sort of take feedback. Even for me, I preach it all the time, but when you hear that constructive feedback, there's always sort of that little butterfly moment where you're like, okay, I'm going to take it. It's a gift. I know it's a cliche, but really being open to that, knowing it's not an easy thing. It's not easy saying, hey, you come across a certain way. Here's how you can fix that. But being open to that, and being open to that message that is not always a fun message to receive, is really important. I think once you get to that level where you can take that and say, look, I appreciate it, I'm going to apply it, then you can move forward. You don't want to change who you are at heart. You have to be authentic to yourself, regardless. But again, being very conscious of your unconscious biases is critical.
So that's so valuable for people to hear. So let me review what you just said, because I think it's important to bring it out. You said great work can be done, and measurement, right? Like ROI. This leader is just killing it. They're doing wonderful work. It's measurable. Here's the profit margin, this, that, and the other. But they don't measure how the work is to be done, right? Which means the lasting effect, the repercussions of getting to that great work. So what does that mean? That means that they're damaging the psyche. And I'm being a little bit over dramatic here, but it's true. I've had Karen Dillon on, who wrote a wonderful book with Rob Cross on micro stressors, right? So when the leader that is progressing and doing great work, but then is angering or making people feel insecure about their work on the team, right? Or getting in the way of communicating effectively, or going behind someone's back to make this initiative go, but then what's that doing to that person's leader? All those little micro stressors add up. And then if you could just, you can't eliminate them, right? Because we can't change who we are. But if you could mitigate them and just regulate them, even better work can be done. Is that fair to say, Len, in your experience?
Absolutely, Chris. At the foundation of all of this of a great team is that trust. And little by little, that can erode when those micro stressors, as you just said, they do pile up. We're very conscious about that. But they do exist. There's no sort of pure world. Everyone has their own sort of priorities and thoughts. I think what's really important, and sometimes what's missing, is that sort of systemic thinking, in that you may make a decision that's great for your team, for you personally, and it might be the right decision. And you look at the data and say, yes, this is the right decision for my team. I think what sometimes is missing is, okay, systemically, what impact does that have downstream to the greater organization or to that other team? And at the end of the day, to the company or the team or the larger group. And when you don't have those relationships and empathy and how it's going to impact others, you're really missing out on the right decision. So just because it's a right decision for my small ecosystem doesn't mean it's the right solution across the board. And again, if you haven't created those relationships ahead of time, and if you aren't empathic to what they're going through and understanding why they're making their decisions. And it's not just I don't want to have this come across as fluffy, but you really have to have empathy and say, okay, this is why they made the decision. I really understand their role. This is why stretch assignments are so important, because you've lived in someone else's shoes. For example, it's one thing to sort of understand it at a high level, but to actually really understand what that person's going through, and really having created that fundamental relationship. Without that, you're going to have sort of this erosion, and then you're going to have lack of trust. It's not sustainable. So short term, you could rock it. You could get this project out. Meanwhile, you've burned bridges, and you've got several stakeholders uh, that probably don't want to work with you again, or if they do, are not going to be at their best.
So let's level set here. You graduated from St. Mary's College in 1991, right? You're a year younger than me.
We don't want
And
to share that, do we, Chris?
I've been friends with you since we were at St. Mary's. So I'm giving the folks the context for this reason. I'm paying you a compliment here. You're the exact same person. Now you've evolved, matured. You have a family now. I have a family. Things have changed in our lives that are natural for folks at our age. But you are the same human being with the core values, the strength, the sturdiness that is Len Girimonte. Seriously. And that's the wonder and beauty of a long friendship. So let me ask you this. How did you get into leadership development, Len? Because you embody this. You come across, you're kind. You bring people in, you listen well. And I'm not just saying this, but I know it. And so tell me how you got into this field so folks can, even more so than the valuable information you're sharing with us, but really invest in you and your message.
Yeah, Chris, and look, you've got similar background. I think if I think way back to, and again, unconsciously, growing up and playing on sports teams throughout my entire young career, I look back and I always really loved being a part of teams. And it was great to win individual awards, and that was fantastic. But God, there was nothing like being part of a team. In fact, I spoke with a colleague recently who had played college football, and again, not saying that sports is the end all be all, but he had been part of a team as well, and he said, I find that leaders who have been part of teams, and not necessarily sports teams, just happen to be in my case, they really understand how to connect, and they understand the value of being part of a team. And the reason I go all the way back to that is, I'd started out my career and was pretty successful early on doing things like e-commerce and acquisition integration, work like that. But it wasn't until I myself was put into a leadership program early on in my career that I said, gosh, this is what I have a passion for. This is so great. I get to help people move the needle, learning and development. And really, more than anything, when you can take someone who's, being challenged with something, and then the light bulb goes on and you're able to share that. Look, I learn even today. I mentor, but I also have mentors today. So the learning never stops. It never ends. But to get that, and to get someone who may not have been as confident to sort of change, and when you see that direction, while they're still authentic within themselves, able to sort of lead a team and get people behind them is huge, regardless of role. I think anyone can be a leader regardless of where they are in their career or their role.
You just said something there that is the core reason, one of the core reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing. And it's similar that you and I have this in common. When you see someone get that confidence to lead and get their full potential, that is why I'm doing what I'm doing. When you can spark them to find that passion or the path, and you see the physical metamorphosis that goes on when they're sitting there in front of you, and the light bulb goes off, and they're able to lead a better life, and they're able to see, hey, I can do this. I can empower people. I can create strategy. I could do something I never thought I can do. And then you receive that feedback, and that's what it's all about. Isn't that the reward from that is you can't even measure that, Len?
No, not at all.
What do you do when you have a high performer? And we talk about this all the time on the podcast. You got a high performer, whatever it is that they do. It doesn't matter what the function is. And all of a sudden, this is a high performer. We need to promote this person, and they're responsible for 6 people. They don't necessarily A, want to do that, B, have the skill to do that, and then C, the one that's the most frustrating, or want to learn how to do that. And it's no fault of theirs. It's just, it's a breakdown in the system. How have you dealt with folks that either don't want to lead or can't lead?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've seen several examples throughout my 20 plus years of someone who excelled in their role, loved their role, and then they were put up into a manager role and they didn't know how to lead a team, or they didn't know how to, that wasn't their core competence. A lot of times, I think some mistake that people work on is really trying to fill in the gaps of their perceived weaknesses or areas that they're not as strong at. There's a theory, and I believe it to be true, is focus on your strengths, because you'll have a passion for that, and exponentially you can be great if you really focus on your strengths. So if there is a person that, quote unquote, may not have this sort of manager leadership path, then I think the good companies understand that and create a path that fits the strength of that individual. Uh, it's not, in the past. I think it was very hierarchical, where it was like, hey, look, I have to go from this to a manager and move up that way. I think there's other paths that will help the company, where you can have like a distinguished engineer, or a huge subject matter expert that can lead in that way. So I think there's different paths, and it's really important to understand what makes that individual click, because that'll help the organization as a whole.
Okay, so let's just say, and I'll dive in specifically to what you just said, you have to have that conversation. Hey, we're going to not necessarily promote you and have a bigger title, but you're going to be a subject expertise, right? You're going to have something that you do really well, and your title will reflect that. You just aren't going to have any direct reports. So that's, let's just say hypothetically, but I'm getting into a new topic here, which is difficult conversations. This is the buzzword. Everybody's having this, and it's, coming out of COVID a few years now, and we're trying to understand the way we work with one another is evolving, coming back to the office, maintaining, platforms like this. Len, how do you advise folks from a leadership development standpoint how to have difficult conversations?
Yeah. I think it all starts with having care. Uh, and if you go in with that mindset, that helps a lot. Showing care. As a leader, I think you have to be in service of others. And if you don't have that mindset, that it's just not going to come across that way. Having that difficult conversation, it's not going to be easy. But if you go in with that mindset, is like, here's what we're trying to achieve, the best outcome for the individual, for the team, for the organization. That's where you need to start from. And then again, it goes back to understanding who you're speaking with. How do you get that message across? Making it a sort of a mutual experience, and where so that you're providing, it's not Len coming across and saying, here, Chris, here's what you need to do. It's, okay, how do we work on this together? Let's talk about what's most important to you, to the team, and putting it out on the table that way. I think it's much easier to get that difficult message across. They're not easy. None of us feels comfortable having them. But if you're doing it for the right reason, and the end result is going to be better for you, the team, the business, and stating that right up front, that's how you get that message across. But if you don't go in with that sort of mindset or that attitude, it's not going to be achievable at all. And that also goes back to why you need to create relationships. If Chris, you and I haven't had that relationship in the past, and I suddenly have to go in and have that difficult conversation, it's going to be much harder to give and much harder to receive. And that's why it's important to, sometimes I'll chat people up and just say, hey, how's it going? And there's no business reason behind that. So important to sort of maintain and foster those relationships as well.
Because we have seen leaders, worked with leaders, because we've been around for a while, right? and you have the annual review, which sometimes can be a difficult conversation. And they open up a drawer and they're pulling out like 4 little sticky papers. On June 30th, you did this, and on March 4th, you could have done this better. It's like if you had fostered that relationship and we had had conversations, we could have dealt with the March 4th incident on March 4th. And you get my point, right? That's the value of continuous relationship building. Exactly what you're saying. So there's no surprises in a quote unquote review or a difficult conversation because you've dealt with it. And sometimes it's as innocent as having a drink at happy hour and talking about it, or over lunch, right? It's part of your process. That's how healthy cultures are formed, right?
Love that. And that's what you have to, and I think the good companies really do that and put forcing functions into play almost, so that you have regular, at least quarterly conversations around your development, around, look, here's what's going on. Tell me. I've always told people, like, look, if I drop the ball on something, tell me right away so I can fix it. First of all, so I know what's going on. Secondly, I can fix it right away, and don't wait a week or two, because I won't remember what I did a week or two before, and it's going to have much more resonance if you tell me straight away. But that's so huge. It cannot, that review cannot be a sort of a checklist exercise at the end of the year, because you're right. You're not going to remember March, let alone 2 weeks ago, what we're doing. So,
and it's unfair, right?
Unfair. Yeah.
Yes. All right, Len, the all-star moments. Are you ready to rock and roll? These are 7 rapid-fire questions. Answer quickly, and then we'll let you go and develop more leaders. Are you ready? Here we go. 1, how do you deal with adversity?
Just knowing that each day is a new day. And if I've had a rough day of adversity, just approaching it and being resilient around it, and dealing with life as it is, as opposed to what I'd like it to be.
Ooh, 2, how do you give yourself fuel?
Staying connected to things that really excite me and that I value, which is why I do what I do.
3, what does never give up mean to you?
Again, just sticking with it, being resilient, knowing that while times are tough today, it's another day tomorrow, and things will always change and have ups and downs, and just sticking with it. If it's a roller coaster, it's fun, right? It's better than a boring ride.
No doubt. 4, what is the value of collaboration?
Everything. If you can't collaborate for results, to me, it's not worth doing. It's one of the huge things that I look for in my team as well. If you can't collaborate, it's just a no-go.
Hiring people. What does Len Girimonte look for in an ideal candidate?
Adaptability, versatility, a team player, and again, going back to collaborating for results, and able to share their failures with others as well.
There's that vulnerability, Len.
Yeah.
6, describe yourself as a leader in 1 sentence.
Kind, empathetic, collaborative. That's a fragment, I guess.
7, last one, manager versus leader. Describe the difference.
Yeah. Manager really focuses on sort of like tactical roles that are important from a manager standpoint, things like budget, et cetera. A leader, regardless of role, inspires, connects, and helps others grow.
Len, thank you. This has been tremendous. Exceeds my expectations. I've absolutely loved it.
No, you're great at this. Thanks, Chris.
And we thank Len very much for being on the show. My number 1 takeaway is definitely the exchange we had on difficult conversations. So, Len, we asked him, how do you prepare for a difficult conversation? This comes up all the time. Here's what we talked about. He said the following: you have to create relationships so that the difficult conversation is just another conversation. You have to be in service of others. It's a we conversation, not an I conversation. I need you to do this. You need to do that. It's we together helping the department and of course, the organization at large. It's a mutual experience. Be upfront, be transparent, and engage with the person and wanting both to win, meaning walking away with tangible ways to get better and improve the culture and therefore do what is necessary to make the company great. I really appreciated Len, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Have a great week, everybody, and we'll see you next time on Keep the Line Moving. Every week, you hear guests on this podcast talk about some of their biggest leadership challenges. As a leader, you want to make an impact on those you lead and reach your organization's goals, while also optimizing your time management. Wherever you are in your leadership journey, we could all use some help. This is what we focus on with our group and individual coaching services. To book a call or get more information, email me directly at chrisg@garganoleadership.com or visit our website at garganoleadership.com. For our podcast and video producer, Jack Radutsky, and our marketing coordinator, Savin Narwal, have a great week, everybody.